Welcome back or welcome to Mount Greylock. We are excited to be able to offer a modified athletic program this fall. I was able to speak with the majority of the students last night, and I know some of you were listening as well. New students were able to meet the Student Athletic Advisory Council. These upper-class athletes met with students in small groups to introduce themselves, complete a few icebreakers, to review old regulations, and to learn the new ones. The goal was to give our younger students a recognizable face to find and ask questions this year when needed, as well as for students to hear about these regulations from their peers. The MIAA requires that schools meet with families prior to each season. Watching this video will meet that requirement for parents. With everything going on, our regulations are more important than ever. Thank you for your patience and support through this entire process, and thank you in advance for helping ensure that students understand the importance of the new EEA, DESE, and MIAA regulations. Our goal is to offer a chance for students to get away from their computer screens, be physically active, develop skills in their specific sport, and to learn all there is to learn in a team program. Each and every one of us will be required to help this process to ensure our students and community are safe and that we're able to still offer this opportunity for students. So once again, thank you. A completed registration and updated physical are still the two main requirements necessary to begin a program this fall. Based on new regulations, students are unable to sit and watch a practice this season. Therefore, if a student does not have both of these requirements, they should not attend practice until they are eligible. There are also fees associated with each program. They are based on the amount of time a student would spend in the program. The fee for football and unified basketball is $30. The fee for soccer and volleyball is $50. The fees for golf and cross country will be $90 for high school students and $70 for middle school students. Please do not assume that we have your registration and your physical. Please double check with me, either call or email, and I will let you know if we have both requirements. To start with a few of our usual student guidelines, a student's academic performance and attendance in class remains important. Students need to be enrolled in a full course load and passing their classes to be involved in after-school programs. Students need to be in class, regardless of whether that class is remote or in person, in order to attend programs after school. A student who knows they will be missing a class, or more than a class, for an appointment should reach out to me as soon as they know. This will avoid concerns or ineligibility issues on the day of. Injuries are important. They will happen in a sport. Head injuries, we remind students to take them seriously. All students and a parent were required to take a concussion course online as part of the registration process. This shows you how seriously we want students to take these injuries. If a student is experiencing any of the symptoms listed in that course, they need to stop immediately. Coaches will help with this process, and there is a packet online, and coaches have copies of this packet that students should bring to the doctor's office with them. It has a page for accommodations that may be necessary for school, and when you are able to get to that point, it has clearance information. For non-head injuries, a medical clearance is still required. If a student is sitting out for pain more than 2 days of a practice, they will need clearance. If the nurse or athletic director notices that a student arrives to school with crutches, some type of splint, or other device to help an injury, that student needs clearance. And lastly, for those that have physical education class, a student may not sit out of physical education class, yet still participate in their athletic program after school on that day. Additional points included in the Code of Conduct are chemical health, opioid misuse, and hazing. There are documents included in the registration about each of these topics. We want students to be safe, and therefore we want them to avoid using, possessing, selling, or being in the presence of alcohol, tobacco and related products, or any controlled substance. Students that violate that expectation will be suspended from sports for a period of time. Recently, the misuse of opioids has been overwhelming. This is especially true for student athletes. So the state has required each school to provide information regarding the misuse. There are multiple very helpful documents in the registration, and I ask that you please look at them. While playing a sport and being on a team benefits students in many ways, including social connections, structured after-school time, and physical fitness, it can also lead to an injury. In rare cases, sports injuries may result in pain that is severe or long-lasting enough to require a prescription painkiller. If a student athlete is injured, whenever possible, treat the injury first with rest, ice, compression, elevation, and anti-inflammatory medication after speaking with your doctor. When a student goes to the doctor for one of these injuries, ask the doctor if an opioid can be avoided. Ask if there is another approach to help avoid the pain the student is in. As I mentioned earlier, the new requirements from the EEA, DESE, and MIAA are all created to help keep people safe while remaining involved in athletic activity. At Mount Greylock, we need to make sure we are doing this right. Most importantly, we need to keep our students and community safe. Secondary to that is the understanding that the opportunity to host these programs and participation in them is a privilege. Many of the schools in Berkshire County are not offering programs, and we need to ensure we are offering them correctly so that we can continue to do so. If we are unable to follow the necessary guidelines, we will have to stop our fall programs. This will also affect any future athletic programs at school this year. While each of the new regulations and guidelines were covered in detail in the registration, I would like to review them now to ensure they are clear to students and families. All students involved in a fall athletic program, be it a competitive program or practice program, will need to wear a facial covering. It is strongly encouraged that masks be either multiple layer fabric face masks with a tight weave or paper surgical masks. All masks must fully cover both the nose and mouth. Studies indicate that bandanas, neck gaiters, and buffs, and masks with exhalation valves are less effective at preventing droplet spread. Students will wear their masks while waiting for practice to begin, while warming up, during each drill, while changing drills, while speaking with coaches in small groups, while cooling down, and while waiting for transportation home. Additionally, we ask that student participants remain distant from each other as much as possible. This means during warm-up, students will be spread out across the entire field. This means while running through the woods, students will not be clumped together, but instead spaced apart as they run. Distance is also necessary while waiting for practice to begin and while waiting for transportation after practice. This season, students will be divided into small pods of 5 to 10 students. This is the pod that students will remain in for the duration of the season. These same groups will be used doing all drills and even for racing and matches this fall. Families will be required to complete a health screening for their children every morning prior to the school day and every non-school day prior to practice. This will eventually be something that is completed through the PowerSchool system with the school. Until that point, the Google form included in the email sent to families needs to be submitted each morning. Students cannot attend practice without completing the screening. If a student is experiencing any of the symptoms listed in the screening, causing a parent to check yes, that student needs to remain home. Families should contact the school nurse for further information at that point. Students will not be able to return to practice until we have heard from the school nurse. Please be honest when completing these surveys. Students should plan to arrive to practice completely ready to go. Students coming from home should head straight to their practice area. Those who practice outdoors should never enter the building. Those attending a volleyball or basketball practice need to go immediately to the gym and not take any detours to classrooms or the locker room. Students who are attending class in person on any given day should be as prepared as possible. If a student needs to change, the locker rooms and bathroom near the gymnasium will be available and monitored. Students should wear their masks and distance themselves from other students while quickly changing. At that point, students need to head immediately to practice. There will be porta potties out at each field for students that need to use the restroom during a practice. We ask that students arriving from home do not arrive more than 10 minutes prior to practice. We cannot have students hanging out while waiting for practice this year, so there will be no hanging out in or outside the building. The state regulations indicate that students need to keep any and all personal belongings in a gym bag this season. Students cannot bring multiple items to a practice and need to have everything in their sports bag. That sports bag can be a plastic bag, a school backpack, or a duffel bag. Those who indicated they were in need of a bag or water bottle will be provided with one this fall. Students should bring their own water bottle to practice and not allow peers to use that bottle. Students are encouraged to carry sanitizer or wipes in their bag as well for any breaks during practice time. The state also asks that everything in that bag, as well as the bag itself, be disinfected before each practice. Some of the transportation details for this season are still being worked out. We expect to provide bus transportation to cross-country races and golf matches. Bus spacing is limited, so the number of buses will be determined based on where we are going and how many students are involved. Busing to practices has ended up more challenging than originally expected due to the change in practice time for each program. We are still working out some details, but I included a sign-up for the first week of practices in the email sent to families. Coaches are hosting individual sport meetings for specifics about each of their programs. You will either be receiving a link or have already received a link to each of these meetings. Please let me know or let a coach know if you have not received that information. This concludes the summary of the regulations for this fall program. Once again, I appreciate the support and help people have provided over the last few weeks and will continue to provide this season. I remind parents to submit the verification form. The link is included on this page after you have completed watching this video to meet the state requirement. Let me know if you have any questions on the material that was in this video or any other thing for the fall programs. Thank you for your time and have a great afternoon.